of the Macedonian Society of Great Britain, I would like to warmly welcome you to tonight's lecture here at the Hellenic Centre. The Macedonian Society of Great Britain was founded in 1989 with the aim of promoting the history, culture, and heritage of Greek Macedonia, and of informing and educating the public about the profoundly Hellenic character of Macedonia and its historical legacy. It's therefore especially fitting that tonight we gather to explore another remarkable aspect of the Hellenic civilization, its enduring contribution to medicine, philosophy, and our understanding of the human mind. Our speaker this evening, Dr. Spyros Retsas, hardly needs any introduction. Born in Thessaloniki and educated at the Aristotle University, Dr. Retsas has had a distinguished international medical career spanning decades. He served for 33 years in the British National Health Service and later continued his oncology research and practice at the Cromwell Hospital in London. His work in melanoma research earned him international recognition, and he has lectured extensively around the world. Beyond his medical achievements, Dr. Retsas has made major contributions to the history of medicine and Hellenic scholarship. He co-founded and served as president of the Hellenic Medical Society in the UK and the European Society of the History of Oncology. In 2018, he was honored by the Academy of Athens for his contributions to medicine and the history of medicine. Tonight, Dr. Retsas will guide us through a fascinating intellectual journey entitled The Brain and Nous in Greek Antiquity, examining how Greek thinkers from Alcmaeon and Hippocrates to Aristotle, Galen, and the Byzantine tradition shaped humanity's understanding of the brain and the mind. So please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Dr. Spyros Retsas.
Spyros, welcome this evening, and a warm welcome also to all those who are attending online this lecture. I'm grateful to President Dafas and the Council for the invitation, and many thanks also to my friend Yanis Karas, who has been behind the organization of this event. I'm a retired medical oncologist, and brain was one of the most difficult areas to manage during my oncology career. This was perhaps a stimulus for finding out what did the Greeks understand in Antiquity about this important organ. This is what Aristotle writes about encephalus, the brain. He says that animals that have red blood and also mollusks have a brain, which is located in the head. Man has the largest brain of all. It is enclosed in two linings in meninges, what today we call meninges. And it is meningitis that comes from the meninges. And sadly, we had two episodes with tragic events recently in this country. He recognizes that the brain has two hemispheres. And he also recognizes that there is a cerebellum, which in Greek is called parenkephalis. So why start with Aristotle when Hippocrates wrote about the brain? Before him, Plato and Alcmaeon because he got it wrong. Aristotle got it wrong. The vertebrates today include the animals with red blood that Aristotle described. They only represent 3% of living organisms on Earth, and we humans represent a tiny fraction of that. But the brain in vertebrates, what we call spondylota in Greek, is a dominant organ. The medicinal leech Hirudo medicinalis, that is the medical name, was the first invertebrate in which a neuron cell was identified. And recently, in the lay press, an enterprising correspondent argued that the hermaphrodite leech is reported to have 33 brains. This is just one cell in the 33 segments of the animal. The encephalization quotient is the way to understand the size and weight of the brain in relation to the rest of the body. However, this formula, unfortunately, is not meaningful for invertebrates, so I cannot tell you how clever the leech may be. But going back to humans, we read that in the mummification process that was practiced by the ancient Egyptians, the heart was carefully preserved, whereas the brain was totally discarded. Believed to be endowed with all knowledge and feeling, the heart was deemed essential for judgment in the afterlife. So, this is what the Greek historian and traveler Herodotus, from Halicarnassus, who visited Egypt, tells us about the procedure. First, they remove the brain through the nostrils with an iron hook. That is part of it, and then the rest by pouring drugs inside. Πρώτα μεν σκολιώσει δίρο δια των μυξωτήρων, εξάγουση των εγκέφαλων. Perhaps the heart's unremitting beating from the uterus to the brain, pounding during emotions and combat, fascinated the ancient mind more than the apparent inertia of the enclaved brain. When Lord Capulet learns of the love affair of his daughter with Romeo, he says, "Be still, my heart, and let me rest a while." Doesn't invite his brain to calm him down. And 1,000 years before Shakespeare, Sappho, known to you all, also invokes her heart for calming down when a girl sees laughing her boyfriend. I don't think you will find any mothers in Greece that call their loving children my brain. They call it my heart. And the same applies in Spain. They will say mi corazón. They will not talk about the brain. Ictus is a Latin word that means spasm or convulsions. And we find in the Edwin Smith papyrus and inscribed on stone during the Neo-Babylonian period descriptions which represent ictal episodes, what we would call today epilepsy. But such descriptions are not necessarily clinical observations related to the brain. They are rather beliefs and interpretations, largely by priests, of divine, often punishing interventions. You heard what Herodotus says, that the brain is discarded during mummification. It's not an important organ for them. So, what did the Greeks know about the brain? Well, if we start with Homer, we find the word encephalus in the Iliad and the Odyssey. Alcmaeon of Croton makes important contributions, as you'll hear later on, to the brain. Hippocrates, of course, Plato, Aristotle, the anatomists, Herophilus and Erasistratus from Alexandria, Rufus of Ephesus, Galen, and Oribasius. Oribasius is the personal physician to the Emperor Julian, who visited Delphi during its decline, and Pythia would not deliver Chrysmon. This is what we find in Homer. In the Iliad, we read, Oves phencephalos hamadis rei, os ove inis. Brains be thus poured forth upon the ground, even as this wine. And a similar episode is described in the episode of the Cyclops. But these are not references to an organ of intellect, rather targets of combative episodes. Also in Homer, we find references to Nous. My son insists that I should pronounce the word nous, because it is an ancient Greek word. I will continue with the current pronunciation that is used in Greece. So here we read, Midoutos agathos per eon theokliv achillev. This is an episode, an argument between Agamemnon and Achilles. What Agamemnon says, do not thus, mighty though you are, godlike Achilles, seek to deceive me with your wit, for you will not get by me, nor persuade me. So nous appears also in the Iliad. But it is believed that the first person in the world history to consider the brain as an organ of intellect is Alcmaeon of Croton. Crotone was created by the Greeks in the southeastern part of Italy, and this is where Alcmaeon lived and practiced sometime in the early 6th century BC. He is quoted, as you'll see later on, by Aristotle, Galen, Plutarch, and many others. Now, remember what the Egyptians did to the brain, and consider now the opening sentence in the chapter on the sacred disease. He writes, it is thus with regard to the disease so-called sacred. It appears to me to be no more divine, no more sacred than other diseases, but has a natural cause in its origins like other affections. Περιμένεις ιερείς νόσου καλεωμένης οδέχει. He goes on to say in the same treatise, man ought to know that from nothing else but from the brain come joys, delights, laughter, and sports and sorrows, griefs despondency, and lamentations. This is an important moment in the history of medicine because theosophy and superstition is put aside, and medicine, for the rest of the history of the world, becomes a clinical science. Also in the Sacred Disease, we read, in these ways, I'm of the opinion that the brain exercises the greatest power in man. This is the interpreter to us of those things which emanate from the air when the brain happens to be in a sound state. Κατά τα αυτά νομίζω τον εγκέφαλον δύναμη πλήστην έχει εν το ανθρώπου. And in a different treatise on the traumata to the head, he writes, what we learn as medical students, this is the first thing we learn about the brain when we study medicine as medical students. He advises the surgeon to be very careful not to damage the temporal lobe, because, he says, spasm seizes the one who is cut. And if the incision affects the left temple, spasm develops on the right side of the person, and if on the right, spasm develops on the left. And in another chapter on aphorisms, he writes, brain concussed from whatever reason results. I'm sorry, you don't see the whole screen here. Results in aphasia. Is it possible to improve that? Okay, don't worry. Don't worry. Now, we come to Plato, and although not explicitly named, scholars have argued that Plato refers to Alcmaeon's work in his dialogue Phaedo, when discussing the view that the brain is the seat of intelligence. And in another treatise on Cratylus, which is devoted to language and onomatopoeia, the derivation of names and words, Plato explains through Socrates, of course, the derivation of the name of the goddess Athene from divine intelligence. Τον ποιητήν φασί την Αθηνάν αυτόν νούνται και διάνοιαν πεπηγγένε, αλλά στα θεία νούσεις αυτής διαφορώντες των άλλων θεονόην εκάλεσαν. And on the right of the screen, you see the birth of Athene from the head of Zeus, witnessed by his brother Poseidon. We now come to the founders of the school of anatomy in Alexandria, Herophilus and Erasistratus. And here we are in trouble, because although they are considered to have performed anatomical dissections of the nervous system, they are the first ones, and they are cited by Rufus of Ephesus, Galen, and others. They are accused of vivisections. In other words, they were operating on convicted criminals. However, such claims have not been indisputably substantiated. The picture of Erasistratus on the right is not from the time that he lived. It has been created later to depict him as a pernicious character doing terrible things. These issues were raised by theologians, early theologians, who at the time were more concerned with the salvation of the soul rather than the anatomy of the brain. So there may be some truth in this, but this has not been indisputably substantiated. We come to Rufus of Ephesus, who gives us information quoting the previous anatomies, about the brain. He says it is inside the cranium. We knew that from Aristotle, covered by meninges, one thicker and stronger towards the bone, the other thinner, albeit strong, but lesser towards the brain, and the cerebellum emerging from the base. As for the cavities, they are called ventricles. And he goes on to say that Hierophilus, he refers to Hierophilus, names and meanings choroid and brain's opposites, sensory nerves and motor nerves, with which sensation and voluntary motion are performed and all actions of the body. And we now come to the great Galen. Galen was born in Pergamon, where he studied medicine. He subsequently went to Alexandria and Corinth, where he completed his studies, returned to Pergamon, and he became physician to the gladiators, where he improved his anatomy with a traumator. And is there a problem? Thank you. And he then moved to Rome, where he became personal physician to the Emperor Marcus Aurelius. Galen castigates Aristotle for misplacing the seat of the soul in the heart rather than the brain. This is what Aristotle got wrong. And this is what he writes about this. Erasistratus then, though not before, but certainly in his old age, understood the true origin of the nerves. Yet Aristotle, perpetually ignorant, that is a little unfair. He's not perpetually ignorant, but this is what he writes. Rightly does not know how to explain the function of the brain. Αριστοτέλης δε μέχρι παντός αγνοήσας οικότος απορριχρίαν πιν εγκεφάλου. In the book Περί Φιλοσόφου Ιστορίας, we now come back to Alcmaeon. Galen cites him, asking the question, what is first completed in the fetus? And Alcmaeon writes, την κεφαλήν ενή έστι το ηγεμονικό, the head in which psyche resides. Now, there's a problem with this book because many scholars believe that this was not written by Galen. It was compiled from his work with somebody else who wanted to appear as Galen. We now call him pseudo-Galen. And although the citations do emanate from Galen, the book itself has been called epitome and is not really believed to have been written by Galen himself. In the same book, he cites Alcmaeon again on smell, and he writes, Alcmaeon, in the brain is the hegemonic faculty, therefore it is this that is inhaled, drawing in the odors through the breaths. Alcmaeon and the eγκεφάλωπισιν είναι το ηγεμονικόν. Ηγεμονικόν, hegemonic, is a very important word that we still meet very often today. And on hearing, again, he cites Alcmaeon, and Alcmaeon says that we hear because inside the ear is empty. For this is what resounds with the force of the spirit. For all things empty resound. This is the colossal work of Galen, which is stored in the library of the Royal Society of Medicine, about 20 volumes, half, it is believed, of what he has written in the past, including among them a treatise on the practice of medicine in Homer. Maybe there will be a recovery from Herculaneum of the new library that was discovered there. And one day we may find this lost treatise. How would they protect a wound in the past? Well, they would clean it with wine, they would dress it properly, but also from Galen, we learn that some doctors, and she expresses some reservations here about this application, some write that the spider's web preserves free from infection the superficial ulcers. Recently, there was a paper in the Times about this, and some of you may have seen it. The Latin term is Detella aranae. Galen's work has been translated also from original Greek into Latin by Kuhn in Leipzig. The volumes that you saw are a work by Kuhn. Among his very many contributions to medicine, Galen also described the great cerebral vein, now referred to as Galen's vein. And this is sorry, I can't find it. This is the splenium into which the vein divides, polydos, as he writes it. So today, this vein is known as Galen's vein. After Galen, we have three important physicians. Oribasius, I mentioned him as the personal physician to the Emperor Julian, who visited Delphi in decline, Aetius of Amida, and Paul of Aegina. But there is no new medicine coming from these important figures. They are citing and reciting Galen, Herophilus, Erasistratus, and their predecessors. On the topic of epilepsy, for example, Aetius of Amida writes, Trisicis epilepsias diaphora. There are three different types of epilepsy, and they all have in common the brain's ailment. But if you notice, the title is not his own. It is on epilepsy by Galen. In the same book, in the same chapter, she describes how she witnessed and described an episode of focal epilepsy in a young child. It started with clonus at the tibia, at the leg, ascended through different parts of the body on the same side, reaching ultimately the head. And Paul of Aegina, also referring to epilepsy, defines it as a seizure of the whole body with damage of the hegemonic energies. Remember the hegemony by his predecessors, caused either by the brain itself or by all its ventricles. The intellectual paralysis that gripped Europe with the coming of the new order soon after Galen's death stagnated further progress in the understanding of the nervous system and its properties. Europe had to wait for 1,000 years with the arrival of Vesalius, who refined the work of Oribasius, the work of Galen, of the Alexandrian anatomists and improved on the works of Orivasius, Aetius, and Paul of Aegina. Vesalius was born in what is today Belgium. He came from a long history of a medical family. His father was an apothecary. And he then practiced medicine in Spain. And he was he was accused by the Holy Inquisition of performing anatomy on a living prince before his heart had been had stopped. He was acquitted just, but he was obliged to go to Jerusalem for a pilgrimage. And on the way back to Europe, he was shipwrecked. He landed on the island of Zakynthos, Zante, and this is where he died. And this, what you see here, is his statue in Zakynthos. And we come to our time now. And the question is, well, Athenis, Noesis, and Alcmaeon Hegemonikon be replaced one day entirely by artificial intelligence, what in contemporary Greek we call it techniti haimosini, or will such techni enhance, replace, or degrade the creativity of the ordinary man? The prospect is terrifying to some, inspiring to others, and time will tell. Thank you. There's a gentleman who ask you.
Yeah, good evening. I just commented on your last bit about artificial intelligence, but my understanding of it is like any computation online or Google, whatever search, the intelligence of the robot or whatever it is only as good as the people who program it. And the people who program it or imprint it with sentient knowledge, it's only as intelligent as people who program it. So the people who program it aren't as smart as, say, Hippocrates. It won't improve on his breakthroughs, most likely. I imagine, unless it works out things that no human being could work out. That's my thoughts on it. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Artificial intelligence is like any computer, isn't it? It's something.
I'm terribly sorry. I haven't heard half of what you said.
Oh, right. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Is there a question that?
Yes, the question is, bearing in mind that artificial intelligence, the last bit you meant there,
Yes.
is only as intelligent as the people who create it, manufacture this computer program or whatever it is. If those people aren't as intelligent than Hippocrates, medical experts of antiquity, will it really displace them?
Well, my position is that artificial intelligence is not sui generis. It is created by humans. And its use will depend on the goodwill of the humans who make use of it. The observations, the anatomical observations that we had from the previous ones, they didn't have isotopes, they didn't have CT scanners, they didn't have any of the things that we have today. Yet they made important contributions to the anatomy of the brain because of observation and because of honest research. Honest research, I don't think, is going to create a problem with artificial intelligence. I'm not sure if I've answered your question, but
I guess we're both in the dark a little bit because until artificial intelligence rolls out in the future, we won't know where it will lead us. Yeah, okay. Fair enough. Thank you.
I think that there's a lady here.
We have heard testimonies of people who were declared clinically dead, and they said that they were meeting relatives who had passed away or a light in the end of a tunnel. And I would like your personal opinion. I know there is no scientific answer to this. If there is a separation between conscience and the brain, if conscious survives after the destruction of encephalus of the brain.
My view is that there's no survival at all after the death of the brain. It is what they have called our predecessors hegemonicon. And once the hegemonicon goes, everything goes, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Dr. Retsas. My question is slightly connected. What was the understanding in those ancient civilizations of the connection between the brain, intelligence, and the soul, or the divine? I think what I'm trying to get at, was there some understanding of it being more than just a organ and maybe connecting to something else at any point?
I think this is more of a philosophical question that Aristotle and Plato would be able to answer better than I can. But my personal understanding is what I said before. The brain is the epicenter of everything. And once the brain goes, everything goes.
I guess I was looking more asking about the ancients' understanding of it rather than modern scientific understanding of the brain. But that's, as you said, a question maybe for Aristotle.
Anyone else?
Thank you very much. Did any of these people look at mental illness and the brain's role in, aberration?
Terribly sorry, I have a very bad ear. And
Did any of these people look at mental illness and how the brain was involved in that?
Well, mental illness, in my view, is entirely dependent on the brain. And this is why it is called psychiatry, because it is part of the psyche, which you now believe doesn't reside in the heart, as Aristotle, but it resides in the brain.
And it was known at that time.
It was known by some, not all. I mean, the great mistake that Aristotle made was that he placed the intellect, the psyche, on the heart. This is why he's castigated by Galen. Whereas you had what Hippocrates said, that it is the brain that is the center of knowledge and intellect.
If there are no more questions, you can all join us for a drink next door at the bar. Thank you.